And let's get straight down to business. Our top story today continues from Friday. That's when Reliance Industries arm, Reliance Retail Ventures, announced it's going to be buying a controlling stake of Just Dial. Now, if you were from the 90s, like me, many of us had no choice but to dial eight times, and that was Just Dial's number to get information, contact details from businesses to restaurants to beauty parlors, you name it. It was started by a first-generation entrepreneur, VSS Mani. He will remain as MD and CEO, but with big boy Reliance Industries flexing its muscles and entering Just Dial, what does it mean for the larger ecosystem? We will also be playing you a soundbite. We did have the media reticent Udaan founders just last week. We'll tell you what they think of the competition heating up and what will happen to their first mover advantage. But I'm going to be discussing the pros and cons of the Reliance Just Dial deal with two guests today. I'm being joined by Karan Mola of Charate. We're also being joined by Mr. K. Ganesh. You see him very often here on ET Now. It's always a pleasure to have him. Karan, good to have you on the show as well. Mr. Ganesh, if I could come to you first. You and I did have a conversation on Friday. Since then, more details have come out. A lot of the brokerage firms have been coming out with both pros and cons. The underlying one seems to be that it's going to be a Herculean task to actually execute the larger digital ecosystem and find synergies with Just Dial. Do you agree with that, Mr. Ganesh?
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, a lot is to be seen the way how they integrate, how they work together. But given the Reliance track record of relentless execution on the ground, I don't see that as a challenge. Any integration is tough. Integration of old economy companies and new age companies, even if not a technology company, is tough. So there would be challenges, but I don't see this as a deal breaker in any way. See, the fundamental thing is that synergy is very, very strong. Sorry to use a buzzword. JioMart is built on local business. With this, they can digitize them, help them service the existing customer better, and scale by getting new customers. With 30 million or so listing, Just Dial is the leader in local search, along with Google. Reliance can get huge information about local businesses by this acquisition. This is not just listings, by the way. Listings anybody can scrape on the internet. This is ratings, reviews acquired through years of Just Dial and VSS Mani's hard work. The reviews and ratings are like gold to both Reliance and the customers, as this information is vital to choosing between different vendors for the consumer. So rating is the key. There is no easy way to get these reviews except from millions of customer feedback over the years, which Just Dial has got. So they have got this right now. Now, how they have to execute, they obviously have to execute. It's a large acquisition. It's a large-scale operation. Therefore, we will need to see how integration does. But I see no skepticism being warranted towards ability of Reliance to integrate into Just Dial or make the synergy actually play out and monetize it.
Okay. Karan Mola, if I can come to you now, good to have you on the show. You've just heard what Mr. Ganesh has been saying. Motilal Oswal says that it believes that maybe this is going to be built into another urban company like transactions. So let me ask you, do you see obvious synergies? Mr. Ganesh makes a very pertinent point as far as hyper-local deliveries also goes, how hyper-local anyway has been the buzzword for a while.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Nantara. Like you know, as a child of the 90s, I think Just Dial was really our first foray into internet-related commerce, from a local perspective. And what Money has done, over 25 plus years is actually build a very, very ground-up integrated asset, which is it's difficult to replicate even in today's day and age. I think to Ganesh's point, there are some obvious synergies, and I think he put some very pertinent points. To me, I think the way I look at it is, they've got 25 or 30 million SMEs listed. Ultimately, what the SMEs derive value from Just Dial over the years is basically to get the right kind of discovery for the end users. And as we saw over the last couple of years, the active number of listings, the active campaigns per listing was sort of flat or slightly declining. Whereas a lot of other platforms have come and maybe taken a vertical first approach in weaning off some of those SMEs away from being very active on Just Dial only to going to other platforms. Now, Just Dial is sort of all encompassing, it's a horizontal. And that's where to me the real synergy is, because you can get, as a user and as a B2B2C platform, you can get a lot of rich data as the end platform. And then from a consumer perspective, you get everything sort of at one go, right? So on both sides of the marketplace, there's some very, very obvious synergies. The one that stands out the most is really the data that Just Dial has been able to build on, billions of SMEs over the years, and really understanding how consumption patterns happen. Over the years, they were trying to transition and evolve from a pure search and discovery to more a transaction platform. And to your question specifically, I think that's a slightly longer term trend. In India, like we've seen across multiple verticals, you have to build full stack, which means you have to build from search all the way up to transaction fulfillment. It's not it's not a trivial task. But I think with Reliance's on-ground coverage and what they're trying to build with JioMart, ultimately that will create a lot of synergies. And yes, I think it's possible to build another horizontal, fully integrated platform. But I think the immediate synergies will come more from data and from the ability of Reliance and JioMart to be able to fulfill some of their transactions using local businesses.
And we've heard in the past, right, Mukesh Ambani himself say that data is the new oil. Mr. Ganesh, if I could come back to you, what is this going to mean for the larger digital ecosystem? With Reliance now making clear that it's going to be looking at acquisitions. It's a journey started in 2018 by buying out startups. These days, it's more fashionable to talk about the Tatas, but Reliance started doing that in 2018 itself. And the question then is that what is this going to mean for others? Let's say in IndiaMart or let's say in Udaan?
Yeah, no, so I think from a startup ecosystem, this is a very positive development. The fact that large Indian corporate houses realize the value creation and the value that first generation startup entrepreneurs, new age entrepreneurs bring to the table. Because before this thing started happening in the very recent times, Indian corporate houses, large companies, even companies like Wipro, Infosys, has been extremely shy of acquisitions because they thought they could do it better, they could do it themselves. And this has been one of the major challenges of the Indian startup ecosystem and venture capital ecosystems, that exits don't happen in India because corporate houses don't acquire. Everybody thinks either they can do it on their own or they want it to be earnings per share accretive, profit accretive, so that their stock price moves up. So whether you see Tata's or Birla's or Reliance, in none of this has rarely happened. By them, even Infosys, Wipro rarely did any acquisitions. Okay, right? So, which is not the case in the Silicon Valley. That has been the case. Now it's extremely redeeming to see that corporate houses realize that 0 to 1 is something, or 0 to 10 is something only entrepreneurs can do. 10 to 100 or 10 to 1,000, they can do with their capital, with their brand, with their reach and their execution capability. So they need to acquire, and more importantly, acquire, not distress sale. So you mentioned Reliance having done it, but so far Reliance acquisitions have really been more value buys or distress sale buys. I wouldn't call them as bold acquisition like the Tatas have done now. Okay, right? These are paying top dollar, paying the right price for the value. So this is great for the startup ecosystem, because entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, the whole system can see that corporate houses will realize the value entrepreneurs bring and will do that. So we'll see a lot more activity happening in this, because this has been one of the major challenges of the Indian ecosystem. But let's look at the digitization. Digital is the way to go. It's there everywhere. I mean, again, sorry to use a common word, Dukaan Tech has been one of the hottest sectors over the last few years. Companies like Khatabook, for example, are raising tens of millions of dollars in funding. All these, they help SMEs digitize the business, track and manage payment, do everything that they can do. Just Dial is just the beginning. I think Reliance will acquire more Dukaan Tech kind of companies to digitize and modernize tens of millions of SMEs listed on Just Dial, and also all across India. And Just Dial is not just Kirana stores, by the way. It has listings of providers like plumbers and beauticians, physical therapists like Urban Clap, for example. And Reliance can now launch geo services and target the space that Urban Clap or Urban company is in. So internet is really today become the starting point and the most valuable place to own. Even if you are in tier 2, tier 3 cities, you are getting your information and discovery on WhatsApp. You're seeing products and prices on WhatsApp. You are ordering on WhatsApp or wanting to transact on WhatsApp. So internet as a starting point is the most valuable place to own. See, look at Google or look at Facebook. Similarly, Just Dial is the starting point for millions and millions of customers over years. It makes money from advertising and sponsored listing. Now, Reliance can take this, can take each vertical, each product category, each service area, and vertically integrate and actually start to sell its own products and services, or it can also create robust marketplaces based on the data. So a full stack model that will give you the monetization across multiple verticals, making money from more parts of the funnel than just being the discovery and start of funnel. That is the integrated digital strategy. Now, to your question on what will happen to other B2B marketplaces, I don't think it's a winner take all. I think there will be space for 2 or 3 or 4 of this. So the names that you mentioned, I don't see an existential threat to them, because India is not even scratched the surface. You're going to see huge amount of digitization and technology in all the sectors of the economy. So you can have multiple B2B marketplaces and multiple players like this playing and creating value.
In fact, Mr. Ganesh, that's exactly what one of the brokerage reports also said, that it's expecting the kind of transactions we see in urban company formerly called Urban Clap. Yeah. So very interesting days that are ahead of us. Karan, coming to you for my final question. What does this mean for this race for super apps? I don't know if Reliance or Tata's will formally launch a super app, how far they are from it, but at least the media and the analyst community, the PE community keeps talking about super apps, right? What does this acquisition mean for that?
Look, I think that's an interesting question, but from the eyes of the Indian consumer, I think there'll be multiple approaches, right? And even if you look at what a Flipkart, through PhonePe, through Myntra, through their own ecosystem, what they're doing, what Amazon is doing, there are different takes on what it is to build a super app, or it's probably better to call it a super platform, right? Because then it's sort of all encompassing. It may not be one app, but it may be one very fully integrated ecosystem, sort of the way it is in some other parts of the world. Ultimately, for the large corporate houses, digitization is the key to enhance the future potential of their businesses, and also get into some of the newer areas. So like what the Tatas have done in healthcare, potentially what is being looked at in areas such as logistics, and other new up and coming areas which are digitized. We've not even talked about some of the other B2B or B2R platforms which are digitizing other existing industries where you've got very large incumbents such as manufacturing, healthcare, agri, and those are significantly large standalone businesses by themselves. I think there is room in the sun, or place in the sun, for many different types of super app or super platform approaches. But I think the starting point has to be, what does the corporate house that's doing it, what is their vision, right? For some, education may be more important at the starting point. For others, it may come much later, because it's either very core to their business or they see an immediate value to some of their existing businesses. What will be very interesting is from the eyes of the customer, what approach they take and what's the positioning in the eyes of a customer, because you can still get all these things even on a standalone basis. But what is what am I getting in addition by being on the super platform, right? Is it more convenience? Am I getting loyalty? Am I being able to just have one sort of sign in for everything and then sort of being able to navigate from there? There are different approaches which have worked all over the world. And ultimately, I think it really has to come on what the corporate houses are driving for, and for them these are large 10, 12 year drives. At least these are not typically 2-3 year things. I think for the Indian customer, ultimately there'll be more than a couple of platforms, maybe 1 or 2 corporate, maybe 1 or 2 from the quote unquote startup world. What will be very interesting is, for startups themselves, these platforms provide great options for cooperation on a much, much larger basis. It provides for shareholder liquidity in addition to the IPO market
Correct.
that we're going to see up and coming. And ultimately for founders, right, to be able to build, as Dinesh said, from 0 to 10 and maybe 0 to 50, and then take it from 50 to 500. I mean, that sort of scaling in a short period of time was just not possible. And this is a great way to help accelerate some of those developments in a shorter period of time.
Net great for the ecosystem. Synergies are always a challenge. Let's see how they are tackled as far as Just Dial goes. Super app, the race continues, and K. Ganesh giving some fantastic ideas here what RIL can do, that is including transactional services. It's always great talking to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us live on today's edition of Startup Central.